I tell this story not to gain your sympathy, but to help you understand that some mornings that seem so peaceful are the beginning of something that changes the entire course of your life. On what seemed like just another ordinary morning, I walked past the wild grass behind the horse stable and saw a silent black shadow. A dog, tied with a frayed rope, eyes full of sorrow, as if it had witnessed the collapse of the world. My name is Lena Morrison, and I live with my grandfather on an old farm on the outskirts of Bakersfield, California. There's nothing there but fields, dilapidated fences, and quiet mornings that send chills down your spine. Every day begins with a cold glass of milk, a creaky wooden chair, and the rooster crowing as if it only does so out of habit. No one caring anymore. That morning began just like any other. I trudged across the dewy grass, my arm clutching the chipped cup my mother used, my eyes glancing at the abandoned horse stable from last winter. But something felt off. The air was thicker, more silent than usual, and then I saw it. A shadow, silent, huddled at the edge of the fence, half its body hidden by the knee-high wild grass. At first I thought it was a coyote. Gaunt, gray, its back slightly arched as if ready to spring at any moment. My heart tightened in my chest. I froze. I was about to turn and leave, but then, what kept me still wasn't fear. It was its eyes. It didn't whimper, didn't growl. It just looked at me. Amber eyes, deep as the night, still to the point of being terrifying. But the fear didn't come from it. It came from what I saw in its gaze. It had known humans and had been betrayed by them. I swallowed hard. Step by step, I moved closer. My heart felt as taut as a bowstring. It didn't move, but I could see. One of its legs was curled up, its fur matted with mud and dried blood. Around its neck was a frayed rope, tightly knotted to a wooden post, as though someone had deliberately tied it there. To forget. Abandoned. Without mercy. I don't know why I knelt. Maybe it was because of those eyes, or maybe because my heart had grown just enough to understand that sometimes life needs to be saved. Not because we have a responsibility, but because we simply cannot turn away. I whispered, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." At that moment, I still thought I was just saving a dog, but I didn't know. I was the one being saved. I used to think only humans knew pain, but that day, in those eyes, I saw a pain deeper than any scream. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I thought it was a coyote, but no, clearly it was a German shepherd, although its gray fur was now covered in mud, dirt, and blood. One of its front legs was curled up, looking like it had been injured for a long time. Around its neck, a worn-out rope was tightly wound, so much so that the skin beneath it was raw, purple, and bruised. It was tied to the very post at the corner of the fence where no one paid attention. No crate, no water, no food. Someone had left it there, intentionally, and not lost or abandoned on purpose. I don't know why the words slipped from my mouth. "Hello there." It didn't react. No barking, no growling, no trembling, no fear. It just stared. But that stare sent chills down my spine. Its amber eyes were deep and still as the morning fog. Not the gaze of a wounded animal, but the gaze of one who has seen too much, has endured, lost, been betrayed, and then chose silence. I sat down, slowly, not doing anything to intimidate. My hand gently touched the rope. It flinched slightly but didn't resist. The only thing it did was keep its gaze fixed on me, never wavering. And I felt tiny. I was the one being observed, being judged. I didn't know what it was thinking, but I felt it clearly. It asked itself, am I just one who will abandon it? I searched my jacket pocket and found the folding knife my grandfather had given me for protection when going out to the ranch. My hand trembled, but I still brought the blade to cut the rope slowly, one strand at a time. After a while, the rope snapped, falling to the dry ground. I held my breath, not knowing what it would do. Run away? Growl? Charge? No. It lowered its head, gently, like a bow of thanks, or a bow of acceptance for the new fate. You're not a stray, I whispered. You used to be someone. And in that strange moment, I no longer felt like a 13-year-old girl lost in a world without a mother. I was the only one left for this dog. Some relationships don't start with a greeting, but with a gaze and silence. I remember very clearly the moment the last strand of rope fell to the ground, like a long-held sigh being released after years of being pent up. I didn't expect it to do anything, truly. But what I couldn't forget was that it didn't run away. I stood up and turned to leave, feeling my heart lighten a little, and then footsteps. Light, not hurried, cautious, but steady. I turned back. It was following me. No need to call. No need to signal, as if it had made its choice. I walked. It walked. I stopped. It stopped. We both seemed to be performing a silent, nameless ritual. I stepped onto the porch. I pushed the old wooden door which creaked, and it followed. Not in a hurry, not hesitant. Everything felt so natural. I forgot I needed to prepare an explanation for my grandfather. I've discovered something, I thought to myself. If someone truly belongs somewhere, they won't need an invitation. They just need to walk in. Walter Morrison, my grandfather, was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal. His thinning silver hair hung loosely over his forehead. His body was thin, but as firm as a pine tree in a storm. He looked up when he saw me enter, and then he saw the dog behind me. The spoon in his hand stopped. His gaze narrowed. He didn't wait a moment before speaking. "What's this, Lena?" I swallowed. My voice was steady. "A friend." He tilted his head, taking a closer look. By then, the dog was standing tall, no longer limping, but still keeping close behind me as if it knew. This was the high-level persuasion part. "No strange dogs in the house," he said, his voice firm. I held up the broken rope, now just a tangled mess of frayed strands. "Grandpa, someone tied it behind the barn. It's injured, left like trash." He went silent, not because he didn't believe me, but he had seen the cruelty in this world and knew there were people callous enough to do such a thing. He walked closer, bent down. His wrinkled face met the dog's amber eyes, and I saw them look at each other, like two old soldiers unknowingly recognizing each other on an old battlefield. "It's hurt," he murmured, gently touching the dog's hip. It didn't flinch. No surgical scars, no bite marks, but the body has witnessed something. "You found a treasure, kid." I didn't quite understand what he meant at that moment, but I knew. His gaze softened. He reached for the cold, smoked meat on the plate, held it out to the dog. The dog didn't snatch it. It lowered its head cautiously, then gently picked it up with its teeth, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. I smiled softly. "Can I keep him?" I asked, full of hope. He didn't answer immediately, but his eyes and his voice softened. "All right, but you'll be responsible. Clean up his room. Deal with the trouble, if any." I nodded and said, "I'll name him Ranger." That evening, as the oil lamp in the bedroom cast a soft, golden light across the corners of the walls, I laid a soft rug under the bed and placed an old pillow next to it. Ranger lay down without hesitation, as if that spot had been his all along. No barking, no shifting, just his gaze. I don't know why the name came to me. Ranger. But when I spoke it, he tilted his head, ears up, eyes blinking slightly, as if he had heard that name before, somewhere far away. So far, only lost souls could remember it. I brought over chicken soup. The smell filled the room lightly. Ranger didn't pounce on it like other hungry dogs. He stepped up slowly, placing his nose near the edge of the bowl, and sniffed gently. Then he ate, one spoonful at a time. No more, no less. I took a warm cloth and wiped his paws, dirty from the ground. There was a small wound on his left leg. But he didn't whimper, just looked at me. A calm, enduring gaze, almost understanding. I whispered, "Where have you been? What have you been through?" Of course, Ranger didn't answer, but briefly he lowered his head, as if to whisper silently, "Don't ask. Just let me stay here." I climbed onto the bed, wrapping myself in the woolen blanket my grandmother had knitted. Outside, the wind blew through the trees. The neighbor's cat cried out in the night as usual. But for the first time in months, I wasn't scared, because I knew beneath the bed there was not just a dog sleeping, but a night guard, a silent soldier. When I woke up at dawn, Ranger was standing by the window looking outside, his stance strong, back straight like a statue. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the first light of the day outlined a thin, glowing edge around him, like an invisible armor. And then I knew. Ranger was no ordinary dog. He carried something with him, a past, a memory, and an unfinished mission. Some dogs are born to be companions, but some are born to fulfill a mission. I was washing the dishes that morning when my grandfather called from outside. "Lena, come look at this." I ran out. My grandfather was standing next to the old kennel, pointing at the wooden door that was wide open. "You locked it, right?" he asked, his voice half skeptical, half surprised. I nodded. The old iron latch could only be opened from the outside by sliding it up and pulling it to the left. It wasn't easy. I had spent 3 minutes trying to open it. Ranger sat beside him, calm, with his tongue hanging out slightly, as if waiting for praise. "Did you open it this morning?" he asked again. I shook my head. No. But I saw Ranger standing there earlier. He looked at the dog, then crouched to check the lock closely. He softly muttered, "Normal dogs don't know how to do that." That evening, when the sun had just set behind the walnut trees at the back of the house, my grandfather brought a chair to the porch and sat next to Ranger. Holding a cup of hot cocoa, I sat beside him and gently placed my other hand on Ranger's head. Ranger lay still, his gaze as alert as always, but there was also a sense of peace, like a soldier on leave in the middle of a battlefield. Suddenly, my grandfather leaned closer, one hand gently lifting Ranger's right ear while the other held a flashlight close to the skin behind his ear. A patch of gray fur was pulled back, revealing a faint inscription. The clear marking is K9C76. The engraving wasn't regular ink, but a special symbol used only for military K9 units. I choked up. "Grandpa, what does this mean?" He didn't answer right away. He just sighed quietly, narrowing his eyes. "This is not a pet dog. This is not a lost dog." He placed his hand on Ranger's head, as if confirming his thoughts. "He was trained, and he went to battle." I looked at Ranger. I suddenly felt grateful, but also worried. If he was once a K9, where was his owner? Why was he left behind, tied to the fence behind the stable? Who had abandoned him with that wound? And most importantly, what was he still searching for? Some things seem lost. They're just not found yet. After discovering the K9C76 tattoo behind Ranger's ear, my grandfather and I couldn't sit still. The two of us, a 12-year-old girl and an old retired soldier, began our little investigation, the one I called the mission to find Ranger's true name. We went to the town library, where hardly anyone under 30 has ever set foot. My grandfather said, "Not all answers are on Google." And this time he was right. I sat in front of the computer and logged into an old military forum that only veterans can access, where usernames are usually unit codes instead of real names. After nearly an hour of digging, I found it. It's an old post, almost forgotten in the data pile from 2020. If it weren't for C-76, my team wouldn't have made it out of that valley. The best dog I ever met. No barking, no growling, but always knew what to do. My name is Jackson Reed, and I owe my life to that dog. My heart stopped. Beneath it were a few comments, mostly expressions of thanks or faint memories, but they all said one thing. C-76 was not an ordinary dog. It was a legend in the Special Search and Rescue Unit. We printed the post and brought it home. My grandfather sat deep in thought, staring at the black and white text as if reading a secret code. Jackson Reed. He repeated the name. I know his unit. They were stationed in eastern Afghanistan back then. I looked at the file my grandfather found on the military archive site. Official information, K9C76, missing with a trainer in the June 2020 mission. Status, MIA, missing in action. No updates, no death notice, no response. So why is Ranger, aka C-76, here in my backyard, halfway around the world? My grandfather placed his hand on my shoulder gently but firmly. Do you know, Lena? Maybe he didn't run away. Maybe he's still looking. I looked at Ranger, who was now lying by the window, his eyes fixed on the distant mountain range. Not the eyes of a lost dog, but the eyes of a soldier with an unfinished mission. Not everyone without a medal is unknown, and not everyone who laughs first will laugh last. I clearly remember that moment, standing in the golden-brown field of the Bakersfield Summer Fair, the sun glaring down as if challenging the courage of everyone present. On my chest was a number tag hastily pinned with 2 rusty pins. On my shoulders were the curious eyes of hundreds of people, and by my side was Ranger, calm, silent, never taking his eyes off me for a second. Trainer Dean Caldwell, who proudly claimed to be the K-9 training legend of the Southwest, arms crossed, wearing shiny sunglasses and a vest embroidered with his name, looked me up and down. Lena Morrison, 12 years old, no trainer's credentials, no registered dog. He glanced at Ranger, then smirked. Is this your dog? I nodded. This one doesn't even meet the minimum standard to be a farm protection dog, let alone compete. The crowd around us burst into laughter. A few kids shook their heads as if I were daydreaming. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Ranger sat still, back straight, ears pricked, his eyes seemingly scanning every breath Caldwell took. All right, first round, hand command response. Chikionto. I raised my right hand, the index finger slightly angled to the left. Ranger turned his head, moving slowly like a gust of wind, silently, perfectly, stopping at the exact spot. Caldwell hesitated. That was luck, he said. Second round, scent detection. 3 boxes were placed on the ground, only one containing the handkerchief I had used. Ranger approached. 1 circle, 2 circles, then sat down in front of the correct box. No hesitation. The entire field went silent. And the final test? I asked. Caldwell snarled. Dangerous situation, defensive reaction. A man in padding stepped forward, pretending to be an attacker. I stood in the middle of the field. No command, no shouting, just a look. And Ranger charged. No growl, no bark. Just a silent gray streak. But instead of attacking, he positioned himself in front of me, back straight, eyes locked on the opponent, one leg slightly bent, ready, but still controlled. The dangerous target stopped. Ranger didn't need to touch him. His presence was enough. The entire arena erupted at that moment, not because of barking, but because of the silent power. Dean Caldwell removed his sunglasses, and for the first time, he was silent. I whispered, I didn't bring paperwork, but he brought an unfinished mission. And I looked at Ranger, still sitting beside me, his gaze needing no recognition, just to continue. The moment the man in the protective gear charged toward me, I felt my heart pounding so hard it seemed like it was about to leap out of my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just looked at Ranger, and Ranger understood. He stepped forward with no bark or sign of panic, each step firm, unhurried, as if he were walking into a battlefield he had known all too well. Ranger didn't attack. He didn't need to. He just stood there, between me and the man. His body was as solid as a wall, ears slightly angled back, tail lowered, eyes locked onto the opponent. No anger, no fear. Just one thing in that gaze. The silent command of a protector who had once saved lives on the battlefield. The attacker stopped. Ranger didn't budge. The entire arena was silent. I heard the click of cameras. Then, a whisper. And then, an eruption, applause broke out. Not because of flair, but because they had just witnessed something sacred. An elderly man in the front row wiped tears from his eyes. A mother hugged her child tighter. And at the center of it all, there was me, standing next to a nameless, undocumented dog, but carrying a story that no one had the authority to dismiss. Trainer Caldwell didn't say a word. His face turned pale. His hands gripped the clipboard tightly, as if it had become a certificate of his mistake. I didn't turn my head when the judge announced the perfect score. I just bent down, gently brushing Ranger's back. Good boy. And for the first time, I saw him tilt his head slightly, nudging his nose against my hand, like a quiet thank you, or perhaps a message from someone who had been absent for too long. Right after the test ended, an older man, wearing camouflage, standing tall like a pine tree in the wind, approached the judges' panel. He wasn't in a hurry and didn't need to introduce himself, just a glance at Ranger, and everything became clear. I'm retired Sergeant Robert Klein, he spoke, his voice deep yet clear. I trained that dog. No mistake, C-76. The entire audience seemed to hold their breath. One of the judges, holding a chip scanner, approached Ranger, and the beep rang out. like a final confirmation to all doubts. The code appeared on the screen. K9C76, Jackson Reed, MIA. No one could speak. I just stood there, my heart pounding like thunder, my hand gently holding the collar of Ranger. He didn't react. He just turned his head to look at me. His gaze seemed to release something that had been held in for a long time. The organizer called out, "Ranger Bravo C76 and handler Lena Morrison, this year's overall champion." The applause erupted. A round of applause not for skill, not for the performance, but for loyalty. I was showered with flowers. Photographers surrounded me. The media pressed in. But all I wanted to do was sit next to Ranger, hold him tight, and whisper, "We found each other, didn't we?" He didn't answer. But I knew his mission had been completed. Or perhaps he had chosen to start a new mission, to be the companion of a girl who once saw herself as an outsider. That's my story. A 14-year-old girl on a small farm met a dog that seemed like a lost shadow in the grass, but he had once been a hero. Ranger wasn't the dog I chose. He was the dog that found me. He didn't bark much, didn't need anyone to pet him, didn't need a stage to prove anything. He just stood there, ready to protect, not for the reward, but because that's what a warrior does. I once thought I saved a dog, but after everything, it was Ranger who saved me. And if you've ever felt like you're not enough, different, or judged just because you don't fit in with the crowd, remember, he had no papers, no awards, but he had the heart of a warrior. And that was enough to change the world of one person. Because sometimes, a hero doesn't need a cape, just a pair of eyes that listen and a heart that never gives up.